Hello, welcome to the Raw Food Health Empowerment Podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Salmon, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, and today we're talking about obesity because of what it means for the brain. Obesity doesn't only raise the risk of diabetes and heart disease, it also affects how we think, feel, and function. Research continues to show that excess body fat, inflammation, and insulin resistance can impair memory, focus, and mood regulation, increasing the risk of depression, anxiety, and even cognitive decline later in life. When we talk about prevention, we're not just talking about waistlines, we're talking about mental health, learning capacity, and emotional resilience. And for children growing up in environments shaped by poor nutrition and chronic stress, the consequences can last a lifetime. Across America, obesity remains one of the most pressing public health challenges of our time, but there's a surprising new shift in the numbers. According to data released just this past October by Trust for America's Health, 19 states had adult obesity rates at or above 35% in 2024, down from 23 states the year before. It's the first time we've seen a decrease in that number since the data set began. So that's progress worth celebrating. But there's a bigger story here. U.S. adult obesity rates still remain at epidemic levels, and children continue to bear the brunt. More than 1 in 5 U.S. children and adolescents between ages 2 and 19 now live with obesity, a rate that has tripled since the mid-1970s, with Black and Latino youth disproportionately affected. And just as communities begin to make small gains, federal prevention programs are facing major funding and staffing cuts. The new report warns that reductions in nutrition and chronic disease prevention programs, along with the elimination of CDC expertise and restrictions on access to nutrition support, could seriously undermine this progress. It even includes a special section on ultra-processed foods, which has been discussed a lot in the plant-based world as of late. The emerging science, the policy debate, and how they're fueling the obesity crisis. So today, we're digging deeper, not just into the data, but into the story behind it. Because when we talk about obesity, we're not just talking about food choices. We're talking about stress, trauma, inequity, the kinds of factors that show up in adverse childhood experiences, or as we call them, ACEs. That's why I'm so excited to welcome Meryl Fury, registered nurse, CEO of the plant-based nutrition movement, and founder of More Plants on Plates USA. Meryl is on a mission to help schools and families nourish children with foods that heal rather than harm. And she's here to share what's working, what's not, and how her upcoming 6 Million Seeds Child Nutrition Summit that she's hosting alongside Ocean Robbins and Dotsie Bausch on December 6th and 7th is tackling these issues head on. Meryl, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. My pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, this is a much needed conversation. The new obesity report published in October that I just talked about showed a slight national improvement, but also warns that U.S. rates remain at epidemic levels, especially among Black and Latino youth. From your work, what do you see as the biggest drivers of this crisis right now?
Oh my goodness. This is such a big question. How many hours do we have to talk? Because this goes on. Oh, it is so deep and so wide. Yeah. So biggest drivers. Well, one we could talk about is school food quality and school food environment as in general. So there are about 30 million lunches served in schools across the country every day when school's in session. And the quality of the food that the children are served is, the best the school can manage given their constraints. I want to put any school district down because I know they are suffering with staffing issues and supply issues and budgetary constraints. And especially, as you mentioned, current environment has taken some money away from school food programs and cut suppliers in some ways. So I know they're doing the best they can. However, there's still a lot of ultra processed food that goes on in the school food environment. And the way I look at it, every time a child steps into a school building or a school environment, they're learning. They're
Mm-hmm.
always learning. Children are little sponges, right? They learn all the time. If they walk into a school building and what they're given to eat for breakfast is something like Pop-Tarts or donuts or cookies or muffin day or whatever, fruit cups, syrupy, sweet things, that's what they learn. This is what we eat, right? This is breakfast, and I'm having it in school, so it must be okay. When it
Mm-hmm.
comes to lunch, there are small amounts of vegetables given at lunchtime. Maybe it's broccoli florets, or there's baby carrots, or maybe there's apple slices, or raw peppers. Maybe there's still a lot of the ultra processed stuff going on, like pizza and corn dogs and beanie weenies or whatever the heck else. So when a child is getting exposed to that every day in a learning environment where their parent is saying, go to school and learn something, that's part of what they're learning. And
Mm-hmm.
that as they grow up, accustomed, acclimated to that type of food, their palate is continually being refined and narrowed to that type of food. And then they grow up to be bigger people, young adults and adults, and that's the type of food that they still want to eat. So we have adults now who have grown up eating, let's say, boxed mac and cheese, or frozen pizzas, or hot dogs, and frozen burgers, things like this, which
Mm-hmm.
are cheap, quick, and easy perhaps, but they fuel the individual in that way of eating, which ultimately predisposes them to different types of diseases, and I'll say physical, emotional, mental health type problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the biggest drivers. I would also add to that, because we have a set of adults who have been raised in that environment, and those adults are now having children. Some of those adults are actually having grandchildren. It's a generational issue. It becomes a generational problem
Mm-hmm.
because grandma or mom is only giving the children the same types of foods. Children are eating those foods, and it just continues that way. So I say those are two of the really big problems. I'll add one other. I'm sorry, this is a long answer to your question,
No, it's good.
but like I said, it's a deep and wide. Our medical professionals do not know this information either,
Mm-hmm.
right? Medical professionals, like all the MDs, all the providers who are prescribing and ordering patient care and getting
Mm-hmm.
paid for their services, by and large, do not get taught about nutrition in their medical training or their nurse practitioner, their physician assistant training. That's not part of the curriculum. Maybe they get 4 hours, maybe they get 10 hours if they're lucky, and most schools are not getting more than that for sure. So what they get is trained on. I grew up eating corn dogs, hot dogs, frozen pizza. They were trained. They came through the same school system, right? They got trained
Yeah.
to eat the same way. Their parents may not have known any better, and the school, medical school, nursing school, reinforces or certainly doesn't do anything to dispel that type of eating. What taught is, if the patient has a nutritional problem, send them to a dietitian. Dietitians are indoctrinated in the ways of this society.
Mm-hmm.
So it is this large machine. It's a machine that churns out this product, which is foodborne illness resulting in chronic illness. Yeah, it's a big. It's like a factory. It's the medical industrial complex that
Mm.
causes a lot of it.
I love your framing on it. Like when kids go to school, they're learning in a variety of different ways, right? And this, I've never heard it posed like this, but it makes so much sense because, like you said, they're sponges. They're picking up everything. And yeah, if like if this is what school gives them to eat, then this must be food, and it must be good food. This must
Right.
be what nutrition looks like. And then now we don't really have nutrition classes, or cooking classes and stuff like in the past where people were making actual whole foods, in school.
Right.
Learning basic stuff like how to take care of yourself. Kids are not learning that. And so,
Right.
you know,
No.
it's like, and I'm seeing this now because, as I mentioned, there's been cuts to nutrition programs, and who is bearing the brunt of this, I'm seeing, are the kids, the children. And as different organizations and churches are trying to support with food assistance while the government figures out who it cares about.
Yes. What it's
um,
doing.
I see a lot of box mac and cheese coming through. Of course, there's a lot of box and cans and da-da, but the mac and cheese, and I remember I had a client with a grandchild, and this was something she really struggled even for herself. She was on her own health journey trying to eat cleaner and stuff, but to not give her grandson mac and cheese, this box mac and cheese, it almost felt like you're breaking this grandmother's heart, And so, as you're making this connection to, the childhood, how we learn, it gets so intricate when you think about how many different areas it gets reinforced.
Yes. So glad you say that. It gets reinforced everywhere. Everywhere. From before the child is born, the child is developing taste preferences in the womb, right? That's something that's been identified already by research. The child comes out, and let's say the mom has had her cravings, right? Pregnant women get to have their cravings, and the mom's been craving somebody's fried chicken sandwiches, let's say. I don't know, right? Let's just choose that as an option. Around here, I live in Wisconsin. Not, like I'm between Milwaukee and Chicago. So there's a string of restaurants, maybe they're by where you are too, called JJ's Fish, right? And there are lots of pregnant women that like that when they're pregnant. So let's say the mom's eating that, and that's the flavor profile that is permeating the amniotic fluid while the child is in the belly. Child comes out, mom continues to eat that, and there's moms who, by the time the child is ready to eat solid foods, it's so much fun to try giving the child what she was craving when she was pregnant, right? Or the first thing we want to give a child when they're 1 year old is that big icing covered cupcake. And we want to take the picture of the baby as they smash the cupcake into their face. They're covered with icing, right? How many pictures have we seen of that? So it starts before they're born, is my point.
Yeah.
And continues everywhere the child goes, to church, to school, to family house, vacation, summer camp, Boys and Girls Scouting, wherever they go. The child's diet in this country is very consistent. It is mostly ultra-processed foods. If they're getting any kind of fruits and vegetables at all, it might be an apple, it might be some baby cut carrots, maybe it's corn. Come on, we can think. There's probably 3 more at most, right? There's not a lot. There's not a lot. And then it just goes from there. It is quite rigid. There's very little diversion from that very narrow picture of what a child eats.
Yeah, I remember recently hearing a pediatrician talk about a little child that came into her office and was guzzling water like crazy. So, of course, she tested the child for diabetes. Turns out the child did have type 2. And it was a 3-year-old child just guzzling down water. And it's really so sad to see this burden on such small, young bodies. But, look at the beginnings. Tia, thank you so much for joining us and for being with us live. She says green beans would be another one that they're probably eating. You're probably right about that. Green
Yes,
beans.
every now and then green beans. Yes, yes. Yeah, I can't
So,
even think of anything else.
yeah. When we think
Maybe
about like
bananas. Bananas.
bananas, yep. And now the
Mhm.
science is trying to come after bananas. We're not going to let that happen. I know, right? But when we think about adverse
Make
childhood
them stop.
experiences, right?
Make them stop. I want you to make them stop.
Yes, we should. Things like poverty, neglect, or household instability. When we think about these things, nutrition often gets left out of the conversation when we talk about these adverse childhood experiences. How do poor food environments function as their own form of chronic stress on these young developing brains?
Oh my goodness. Such a good question. Oh my goodness. So, my professional experience as this in public health, 30 years, veteran. And I went into many thousands of houses and worked with families directly in their own kitchens, right? So little bit of background, when you have a family that comes from another country, let's say they come from Central America, I worked with a lot of people from Guatemala, Mexico, El Salvador. They bring with them their cultural foods, right? The first generation does anyway. That's what they bring with this. So they're going to eating maybe beans and rice. There's probably a fair amount of oil involved. Okay. And there's animal products for sure. But they're also eating cabbage and they're eating tomatoes and their salads and there's fruits. They're from a tropical environment. And a lot of them that I worked with did not have a lot of money. So they stuck with the foods they knew, right? That generation, that first generation that arrives here, generally does fairly well physically. They stay fairly healthy, not a big change from the country that they left. By the time the next generation is born, that generation is in the American dream, right? And they go to school and they start getting trained to eat those same foods that we know, right? The American child diet. While that, and okay, let me back up also. School, being that it has the capacity to feed children who are of lower income. Those children are getting a certain type of food, and a lot of times, our kids who are getting food delivered or provided by the school are in that low income bracket very often. So, child is getting trained to eat these standard American diet foods, which are mostly ultra processed. And I say CRAP, calorie rich and processed, right? Okay. Unfortunately, those foods, and even if the child was coming to school with filet mignon lobster sandwiches, what the child needs is not necessarily provided by those kinds of foods. What the child could use help with is fiber and certain other vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients. There was a study that was done in 2018, it was published in 2018, where the researchers looked at where they found certain neurotransmitters in foods. What they showed was neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and GABA, histamine, glutamate, dopamine, and serotonin are found, at least the building blocks, the components for, are found in plants. So if we are feeding our children healthy plant-based foods, whole plant-based foods, not vegan junk. We're not talking vegan junk, right? We're talking like the raw, how you pull it out of the ground or off the tree kind of food, minimally processed. You wash it and you cut it up. Maybe you steam it. Maybe you saute it, but that's as far as you're going, right? When you feed the child those foods, they're getting the building blocks for these neurotransmitters, which allow them to sit and function in school, allows them to learn and remember and perform tasks of discrimination, delay gratification, modify and moderate their internal and external environment interface, right? How they are literally in the room, right? Is provided transmitters. If we are not providing the foods that make these neurotransmitters, we are basically depriving our children of the chemical keys they need to succeed in school, right? They don't have it. So you have children acting out. You have children falling asleep. You have children who can't remember. We've got more ADHD. We've got more, I'm not going to say autism is connected to food, but there's a strong link for some children. What they're eating can exacerbate their symptoms and how they feel and how they modify, how they self-regulate, right? So, long answer to your question yet again, but when we're looking at children and food and the kind of stress that not feeding our children healthy food has, what it causes in the body, it's tremendous. It's tremendous. I look at it like if not feeding your child to the best of your ability, whole foods, nutrient rich, right? Fiber, you're basically undermining their human potential. You're making it difficult for them to attain. So just one more thing about that. So in low income neighborhoods, and particularly in neighborhoods of color, there is what is called the school to prison pipeline, right? Where kids are identified in kindergarten as being troublemakers. And for every grade they advance, that label goes with them, right? So by the time they're 12, oh my gosh, you're a handful and we can't control you. And by the time you're 15, you've already had your first interaction with law enforcement. Never mind, you don't sit and you don't pay attention and you don't study and you failed all your classes and you're a boy and you act out and you do all these other things. And then you have your first interaction with law enforcement and it's pretty much downhill from there for a lot of kids, but for a lot. So if we wanted to do our best, and I know there's a lot of variables, a lot of factors, you can't control for it all, but for crying out loud, we could interrupt some of it by feeding these children healthy food, stuff that gives their bodies something to work with, gives their brain something to work with, and then there's all the other things that go into raising a child, which are innumerable, but food is a huge.
Yeah, the foundation. Thank you so much for that. Your initiative, More Plants on Plates USA, focuses on engaging schools to change their menus. What does that process actually look like, and what early results have you seen so far?
Oh my goodness, this is, we do a lot of projects at Plant-Based Nutrition Movement. That's probably my superpower is I like inventing projects. This is one of my favorites, though. So More Plants on Plates was born out of the change in the Illinois school food law. It's an amendment that said, in like one sentence, it says something like a child with prior notice can receive a plant-based meal if the child requested of the school board with advance notice to the school board. I mean, it was sort of like a little bit redundant kind of a sentence. But that amendment to that law, which was passed in 2023, made it legally okay and supported that a child can get a plant-based meal. And that means more the center of the plate, what we call that, the protein option, right? So they would get black beans, or they might get falafel, or they might get some sort of a veggie nugget or something, but it would be protein for the most part. So we took change in that law and started to advertise it so that our plant-based moms and dads and kids knew that this is now the law and you can request these meals and you should expect to get them at no additional cost, by the way. And if you don't, you have recourse because this is a law. They have to provide. So that's how it started. since then, we started working on that in 2023. Since then, we've had 17 schools take on some aspect of providing plant-based meals to their students. We've had close to 2,000 kids request meals, plant-based meals, through the school system. And we have been involved with 270 some school districts across the state of Illinois. So that's kind of the big picture. One of the things that we do is, we have a website called moreplantsontplatesusa.org. So one of the things we do, we kind of work both sides of the coin. My mom always told me, don't play both ends against the middle, but that's what we're doing in this case, right? So on one side, we're educating and supporting and encouraging parents and students to request the meals, because by law they have that right. And on the other side, we are also supporting the food service teams in the schools, so that for the food service director, we can provide them with vendors, or lists of vendors anyway, access to them, samples for taste tests, promotional materials for, just getting the word out in school and having it accepted, different meals accepted. I think I said samples for taste tests as well. You want merch? Sure, we have shirts. You want a hat? Okay, we'll figure that out. You want to speak to a school food service professional who has lots of experience? You got it. We do whatever we can to make it okay. We provide webinars and handbooks and change management things, material and strategies, so that we try to make it as easy and as supportive for the food service teams as possible. I would say that it's been pretty successful, given that Illinois is definitely a dairy producing, animal farming kind of state. Yeah, so that's what More Plants on Plates is about. Actually, right now we are in the process of building kind of like phase 2. Phase 1, we did a fair amount of advertising and promotion, grassroots, grass tops level promoting of the program. Now we're going into phase 2, where we'll have ambassadors. So we'll be working with medical providers who are passionate about lifestyle medicine and plant-based eating, who can speak with school wellness committees and bring the message to schools in their neighborhoods and be a solid resource for people to draw on. So that's where we are now with that. It's a very exciting program. I love that one.
Yeah. Have you met any resistance since you've started?
Yes. Yes. I think back to, I got invited to speak at a school, and I walked in, and as you see me now is how I am all the time, right? I'm pretty candid, pretty flat. And I try not to take anything personally, above all, right? Don't take anything personally. But I walked into school just as I am, and I started to present, and apparently I said something that just, I don't even know, put a tailspin on the room. Just, oh my goodness. And before I was into it 10 minutes, I had one lady stand up and yell that she was not going to listen to these lies, and she stomped out of the room, and nobody even said, oh, Martha, she's off her meds. Nobody said anything, right? They took it like, I was thinking the same thing. So resistance in that way, yeah. Schools can be challenging environments. They can be, right? They're used to keeping things kind of pretty controlled. They don't want too much chaos. No extra wildness, please. They have plenty. And that's probably the toughest case I ever ran into. Other than that, mostly what we'll see in the form of resistance is just, no, we're not ready for that, or yeah, but we can't right now, or maybe next time type stuff. So delays and lack of availability for conversation. That's how the resistance comes. It's rarely, no, we're just not interested. Thank you very much. No.
I'm curious, what have you noticed or what have you learned that's coming from, for other folks who are on the ground or they have kids or grandkids and they're trying to make a change? Where do you think that resistance is coming from?
Well, we can go right back to the first question that you asked, because people are still people and they still have their own food addictions and constraints and biases, prejudices, and what my mother gave me as a child, and my family's been eating this for the last 13 generations. This is how I know that I am whatever, name your ethnicity. And I think that's a lot of it. And then you lay on top of it, this is the standard American diet, and it is reinforced from before we are born. And when you start talking to people about how food literally can be medicine, people would rather take a pill very often. It's just easier. If I can go to the pharmacy and grab a jar of some, heart medication or some cholesterol medication, right? I can keep eating cheese pizza every night and just take.
I'm wondering, should we blame M&Ms and Skittles? Because it's like they kind of indoctrinate you, right, into just taking these small, colorful things and just, putting it in your mouth.
That's great.
I mean, like you said, it's a whole complex, right?
Yeah.
Each one is feeding into the other. Indoctrination.
It is such a tightly woven web. Tight. You cannot. They've been working on it for more than 100 years. They've got it down. They've nailed it. They've nailed it down. One thing I learned not too awful long ago was that and your audience might enjoy if they're nerdy like I am and they like looking up weird things, trivia. They could look up something called the Flexner Report. That was a report that was paid for by, I believe, was Andrew Carnegie, maybe with a little help from John D. Rockefeller, is the way I remember it. And the idea was that they were going to define what was a good medical school, what was the syllabus, what courses would be taught in a good medical school. Now, that was back before the Depression, right? So let's call it 1900-ish, 1920, something like that, so about 100 years ago. And what they did was, okay, there were medical schools and they were putting out, producing doctors, graduating doctors. And there were a lot of doctors, apparently. Somewhere they got in their mind that they should limit the number of doctors and make some people not eligible to be doctors at all. So, of the available medical schools at the time, when this report came out, it eliminated quite a few of them. The medical schools, just you are not teaching to standard, so they were eliminated. The ones that allowed women to attend medical school, most of those were eliminated, not all. And for the ones that allowed Black people to attend, only 2 survived: Morehouse and I can't remember the other one. I want to say Howard. I'm not sure. Morehouse was one of them. So you had 2 schools that produced doctors, Black doctors, for the entire Black population all over the country. And whoever else, the rest of the schools produced doctors for white people, because that's the way the world was back then. That meant that because Carnegie had his particular set of investments, as did Rockefeller, what they decided to do was declare all natural medicines, like homeopathics and chiropractic, herbal medicines, things like that, as quackery. And the only acceptable real medicine what was taught in these medical schools that they had careful control over. So there we are, that if your school outlaws and will not even allow the mention of natural medicine or food for health or food as medicine, or, well, then we're relegated to taking pills, like things like M&Ms and Skittles. When we grow up, we keep taking M&Ms and Skittles, right? Little candy bites, little brightly colored things that are supposed to do whatever they're supposed to do. And by and large, if you look at them, many of them are petrochemicals. Many of them are these bizarre. I mean, we have, I think 25% of our medications come from plants out of the rainforest. That's good. But the other, at least 50% are chemicals made in labs that have horrible side effects. It's such a curious situation we live in for health.
Yes, thank you for that. And Tia wanted you to repeat. She said the flex what? You were talking about a report.
Flexner. So I'll spell it F like in Frank, LEX, N like in Nancy, ER. Flexner report.
The history of how we got to be where, because I remember there was a time when, and I say I remember because I read about it. There was a time when herbalists were like at the top of the health chain. They were well respected. People went to them when they were not well, and there was this concerted effort, as you talked about, to change that. I know Kellogg, from the Kellogg cereal that we know, was a huge part of that change as well. So yes, it is a really curious thing when we dig into the history. I would love for you to tell us more about this upcoming 6 Million Seeds Child Nutrition Summit, December 6th and 7th, that you have coming up. What inspired it? Who should attend? And how does it fit into your larger vision for a healthier generation?
Okay, what inspired it is we have to take care of our children. We just got to do better, period. We cannot continue to sabotage their health and then wonder why they're sick. That is a sign of insanity. I'm sorry, right? I think we're the only species that in general actively sabotages the health of their own children. I can't think of another that does that. Periodically, you'll have some dog that won't nurse a particular puppy or something like that, but that's the rarity, right? That's the odd thing. Humans in this society are the only ones that just out of hand dismiss their children's health in such a bizarre way. So that's the motivation, hoping to sensitize people to that, open their eyes to that. When you have a sick child in your house, I don't know if you have any children yourself, but okay, let's say you were a child yourself. You remember when you were sick, if you ever got the flu or you had some kind of strep throat or bad stomach ache, you ruled the house. Nobody did anything to take care of you. Certainly not your mom, your dad, your older people were right there hovering over you, right? For the most part, that's the way it goes. Child becomes the center of attention in the house, which is okay, but why would you intentionally make that condition, right? What I would prefer is to have all children be healthy, grow, thrive, and attain their highest potential. So that's the motivation. You asked me two other parts of the question. Tell me, what was the second one?
Who should attend the summit? Who is it for?
It's for everybody. Anybody who has children in their life. If you are a teacher, if you are a school administrator, if you are a medical professional and you work with children, if you have children, if you're a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, anybody who has access to children and periodically has to feed them something is invited to attend.
Awesome. And what are you hoping that they get out of it?
Exactly what I just described, right? So everything that we've said in this conversation up till now, children even though they can survive, certainly they can survive on white pasta and butter. I know people that grew up like that, right? They can survive on Cheerios or what, Twinkies, Twizzlers. You can, but that does not make for a healthy child. It does not make for someone who's going to really um, thrive until you can change their food. You can do a lot just by changing the food. You can change their whole health trajectory just by changing the food. And that's what I would hope people get out of it. So we talk about education, what happens in schools. We talk about what happens in the family. We talk about how to cook. We have several cooking demos planned so that people can see. It's really easy to put together a plant-based meal that a child will find yummy, delicious, exciting. How do you get a child engaged? How do you get them to start eating Brussels sprouts and beets, right? Those are big people food. How do you get them to eat that? How do you get them? How do you get them? And we talk about the environment because so often, at least among the children I meet, they do not, the message of this is so that when you're 45 or 50, you don't have a heart attack does not land. They don't care about the heart you might have. That doesn't land.
Yeah.
But what does land is taking care of the planet, taking care of other animals, being compassionate and caring. So we have a section that talks about planetary health and animal compassion because that's what resonates with children.
That's so sweet. They're so innocent, and it just speaks really further to the indoctrination. Like, I didn't know as a young person, even though I was lactose intolerant, I was still eating taquitos, eating pizza, all this stuff. There was definitely a cognitive dissonance in my family because we bought lactate, but we were still eating the dairy, and there was no connection. You actually have to rape cows in order to get this dairy. Like, cows don't just make milk for all of humanity because that's what God put them on the earth for. No, they're mammals. They have milk for their children. So they have to stay perpetually pregnant, and birthing. And this is not natural for mammals. Tia says the name of the event and where it's held. The name, yes, the 6 Million Seeds Child Nutrition Summit, December 6th and 7th. Definitely make sure you attend. The link for that is anywhere that you are watching this. Tia, you're on YouTube. It's in the description below. And wherever you're watching the replay, it's the link for that is in the description below, along with the links to continue to stay connected to Meryl and all her work. Everything that you're doing is wonderful and so needed. Nutrition isn't just about food, it's about futures, right? These young people are going to be the future leaders, and we want to make sure there is a level of health literacy that we are not experiencing right now. We're seeing the effects of it now. So if we can do something better with the next generation, it's only going to make things, precipitously better and have a domino effect globally, as you're talking about, not just for personal health, but also the environment. So it's just been wonderful. Do you have any closing words of maybe some advice for fellow advocates like yourself on the action they can take right now, other than definitely attending your summit? But if they're as passionate about, creating a healthier food environment for children, what would you encourage them to do? I don't know.
First, and this sounds like a shameless self-plug. Please contact me. This environment, this situation, this conundrum we have around children's nutrition and their health is too big for one person to handle. Too big for 101 people to handle. It's huge. And just like we've been saying, it starts from before they're born and it continues until the day they die. Even after they die, even after we die, how many of us have gone to the repast at the funeral, and they're serving the same food that killed the person that you're there to. It is so deep. It is so deep and so wide. One person cannot do it, nor 101 or 1,001 people. So if you have a passion for transforming child nutrition, please, God, in this lifetime, let me know. Call me. We collaborate all the time with people, just because it's too big, and I can't. It wouldn't happen if we try to do it in isolation. So that would be one thing. Other than that, if you're not like on that, you don't have that level of passion or time, or you've got other things to do in your life, I understand. You could, if you have a child in a school, go to the school, advocate for your child in school. It could start in the classroom and just find out, is the teacher giving M&Ms and Skittles as rewards, Jolly Ranchers as rewards for good behavior? That happens.
In the church too.
Ask the teacher to please. Yes. In your church. Excellent. Next place to go. Ask them to please not to do that. Because all that extra sugar and the red dye and the green dye and the yellow and all of that, they don't need that. It does not help. And it just reinforces the illness and the perception that that type of eating it's a reward. It's great. It's so fun. It's not.
Yeah. I'm going to have you on the show again to talk about the peer pressure that happens. Because when we talk about children and having them excluded from those experiences, then the next thing that parents and grandparents say, well, there are other kids doing it, and I don't want my child to feel left out, and they go through this whole thing. So we'll definitely have to have you back to talk about it. When it comes to child nutrition, there's just so much to parse through.
It's a world.
Yes. So thank you so much, Meryl, for being here. And you all definitely make sure you check out the description to this video so you can get registered. It is a free summit, the 6 Million Seeds Child Nutrition Summit, December 6th and 7th. So just about 3 weeks away. You have time to invite all your friends, family, church members, everybody everyone connected to a child, like you heard Meryl say. Hey,
or if
Mom,
you were a child yourself.
Yes. And Mom says it's parent responsibility to do the right thing. Yes. And sometimes, like Meryl was saying about Brussels sprouts being big people food, sometimes it's the parent or grandparent that's on that journey too. And y'all can go through it together, make it a family.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I love that you have food demos on it too. That's going to be wonderful. All right. Well, until next time, take care, and we'll see you at the summit.